Okay, so I'm going to talk about, I'm Emma, I work with Heather, I'm from AMS, but I work in community and IACS. I'm going to talk about the penguin index, which is the biodiversity indicator for Antarctic penguins that we developed. So this is the living planet index. It's a biodiversity indicator for all vertebrate species globally. Gives you one number, an idea of how the population, the average population for all species was doing compared to the measure in 1970. So that's the Antarctic, or that's the living planet index. You can disaggregate it across continents, see what's affecting the continent. The problem with the living planet index is where's Antarctica? We studied the Antarctic. The living planet index has basically no Antarctic data. It is not a good biodiversity indicator for the Antarctic. So we want to make a living planet index for the Antarctic, and we are going to focus on Antarctic penguins because they are sentinel species for climate change and do a good job of telling us the trends of what's happening in the Antarctic. So the living planet index uses a generalized additive model for interpolation of time series. Time series are really patchy. We have to interpolate in between years. The GAN doesn't do so great. So it's an uninformative interpolation. It's just using information about the time series itself. And it's also smoothing observations. So it's not just interpolating between observations, but it's smoothing observations that you see and getting rid of the variation. So we use a state-based model to include the variation that's naturally seen in observations. And we can do it more informatively, asking questions about what's happening in other time series to inform this one, and make an individualized state-based model for each species. So we get, this is the penguin index across all 3 species of Antarctic penguins. And we can also, like here, we can find the years in which the trend is changing significantly and the eras of change. So for example, from 86 to 96, the penguin index globally or Antarctic wide is really stable. The average penguin population is not doing. We can also disaggregate this based on species trends. So adeles are relatively stable across the 40-year time period, whereas chinstraps are declining rapidly. And Gen 2s are taking over the world. And we can also, for each species, disaggregate this based on regions. So for example, this is for adeles across the Antarctic. What's the average population doing? On average, the average population across the whole Antarctic is not really doing much, like it's stable for 20 years. But across the Western Antarctic Peninsula, we see huge declines in adelie populations, whereas the rest of the Antarctic is seeing increases, and that's what's averaging out to 1,000. Yeah, so that's a penguin. Cool. So we would love to make an Antarctic specific living planet index. So every species, but we started with penguins because they're a good representative species of what's happening with climate change. But hopefully we'll be able to add more species of penguins and then more other important species across the Antarctic. Yeah, Alan had a question. Yeah, so we know why. Adeles and chinstraps are we classify them as climate change losers, whereas Gen 2s are climate change winners. Gen 2s don't mind a wetter and warmer Antarctic, and their range is actually expanding. They're expanding southward because of this. Whereas adeles and chinstraps don't like the warmer and wetter Antarctic. So the variation we see between species we understand. That's a great question, and I don't think we can answer that yet. I think that's why, like, having just this as our penguin deck, it's hard to tell the full picture from here, right? Because it says, oh, the average population is up 20% from 1980, whereas that's not telling you the picture about chin straps. So I think as we add more species, seals, other seabirds, whales, that kind of thing, like we'll be able to tell more about what's happening on the average, you know.
I'm curious about the next figures of the spatial variation. Are there any plans for kind of using that information to identify particular areas that either need more conservation measures or more attention?
Yeah, so hopefully this will be used by policymakers to understand, like, you know, where do we need conservation measures or that kind of thing. I think it's also important for researchers to know, like, oh, in particular, like, there's a lot of variation here, and maybe we need to understand what's happening with those populations more. Or these are obviously like in trouble. So we need to, you know, make sure we can, I don't know, we want safety of that kind of thing. But I think overall the information of what's happening regionally is really important to, you know, every population inform what is.
Thank you very much.